Hello everyone. Welcome to the Best Anime Recap channel. In this first broadcast, I will discuss the anime storyline with the title, Tokyo Revengers. This anime is produced by the studio Liden Films, a studio that has also worked on other popular anime such as Koi to Yuso, and Hataraku Saibo Black. The anime Tokyo Revengers tells the life of a 26-year-old worker named Takemichi Hanagaki who lives in an ugly, thin-walled apartment. Tokyo Revengers begins with a news report about a mass murder committed by the Tokyo Manji gang. The two people who died in this murder were Naoto Tachibana and his sister, Hinata Tachibana. Takemichi, who also witnessed the news, realized that he had dated Hinata Tachibana back in middle school. But all she remembers about her ex-girlfriend are a few facial features, such as her short hair and smile. Now in his mid-20s, Takemichi works at a DVD store. He lives alone in a small rented apartment, where he is often shouted at by the landlord. He has a gentle disposition, but is often bullied by children younger than him. And he's a loner. While waiting for the train, Takemichi thought about his life as if it didn't move. That's when someone pushed him onto the train track. He saw that the carriage in front of him was about to hit him. Moments before his death, Takemichi suddenly has a vision of Hinata. Then when he opened his eyes, Takemichi found himself on the train. He meets four people he knows as his schoolmates. His appearance suddenly changed. He was now wearing baggy pants and an unbuttoned shirt, and his hair was dyed in a spiky up. Takemichi has traveled back in time and returned to 12 years ago, when he was still in school. Unable to understand the current situation, he then followed his friends, namely Atsushi, Makoto, Yamagishi, and Takuya. He looked at himself in the mirror and was shocked by what he saw. He remembered that he was the bad boy at school. Takemichi and his friends go to a restaurant to eat, where he hears more news. From the conversation between his four friends, he understood that they were going to have a brawl with another school. Atsushi or Akun shows that they have the upper hand because Takemichi's cousin is the leader of the third-grade brats. Full of confidence, they head to the park to fight second-year student Shibuya. Had to wait in the park, but no one showed up. As they were about to leave, they were surprised when a third-year student Shibuya came suddenly. Because they are afraid to mention the name of Takemichi's cousin, who they know is the leader of Class 3 delinquents, but in reality his cousin is just a slave of the gang, is not the leader. Takemichi and his friends end up being beaten and his cousin witnesses it. After being defeated, they walked back wounded and bleeding. However, Takemichi remembered about Hinata and ran to the school to find her address. Once he found out where Hinata lived, he then went to see her. He cries when he sees Hinata because he is overwhelmed with all the feelings he has for her. Despite not understanding what was happening, Hinata comforted him and reprimanded him lovingly for being battered after a fight. After a brief tearful conversation, Takemichi left Hinata's house. Takemichi contemplated in the garden. Then he saw three criminals bullying a small child. Takemichi approached them and defeated the bully. Unexpectedly, the little boy is Naoto Tachibana, Hinata's brother. Desperate to save Hinata and Naoto in the future, he tells Naoto about a time jump and asks Naoto to save himself and his sister from their fateful death, which will come 12 years later. He told Naoto to remember July 1, 2017. Naoto was shocked but believed him. As they shake hands, Takemichi is transported back to the present 2017 year. He found himself in a hospital bed. He asked the police about how he was saved from the incident on the railroad tracks. The policeman was a person in gray clothes. The policeman introduced himself as Naoto Tachibana. Naoto reveals that he is still alive thanks to Takemichi's warning in the past. He studied hard until he finally became a detective, and also saved Takemichi. Unfortunately, Naoto reveals that he cannot save Hinata. Naoto then asks Takemichi to help him save Hinata. Even though Takemichi Hanagaki had only time travel so far, Naoto had gathered a lot of information to deduce how this form of time travel worked. For some unexpected reason, Takemichi's ability could only be activated when he shook hands with Naoto. Naoto believes this was possible because Takemichi saved his life thanks to time travel. Naoto also discovers that Takemichi can only return to the same date 12 years ago, which means if he messes up something while time traveling, then there will be no diversion. This of course increased the stakes in their current situation. Unfortunately for Takemichi, when he time travels he usually jumps back to the moment when he was right in the middle of something. When he time traveled a second time through a handshake with Naoto, Takemichi ended up in the middle of a fight, only seconds away from being knocked out. On Naoto's idea, Takemichi has no choice but to return to the past and stop the two leaders of the Tokyo Manji gang or Tumen, namely Sano Manjiro and Kazaki Tada, so that the two of them don't see each other. If he managed to do it, then it would save the present Hinata. Naoto conducts his own investigation of the gang, and after his predecessor dies horribly, it's clear that Tokyo Manji's gang is dangerous and ruthless. Takemichi first felt the gang violence when he was knocked unconscious by Kiyomasa's friends. Unknowingly, Takemichi asked if Kiyomasa could introduce him to Sano Manjiro or Kazaki Tada. But apparently he shouldn't be asking this question. Kiyomasa got angry and started beating Takemichi with a baseball bat. He was so badly injured that he limped. 14-year-old Takemichi is a coward. He allows himself to be beaten and becomes a slave to people like Kiyomasa and his gang of thugs. Instead of doing something to launch his plan with Naoto, Takemichi goes to Naoto's house to shake his hand so he can return to the future. But just when Takemichi wanted to give up and return to the future, Hinata appeared and indirectly stopped him from escaping. After hearing Hinata say she would protect Takemichi even though she lacked the strength, Takemichi finally got the courage and determination he needed. Despite how frightened he is, Takemichi decides to take the place of his friend Takuya, who will next engage in underground battles. But instead of fighting with the opponent that Takuya will fight, Takemichi actually faces his fears and challenges the king of the fighting club, Kiyomasa. Kiyomasa accepts a challenge from Takemichi Hanagaki, because of course the match will be very interesting where it shows a duel between the boss and his slave. The real reason Takemichi challenged Kiyomasa was so he could meet one of Tokyo Manji's gang leaders, namely between Sano Manjiro and Kazaki Tada, if he continued to be a slave of Kiyomasa. Then it would be difficult for him to meet one of those two men leaders, but as soon as the fight started Takemichi immediately got a direct hit in the face. He realized the very big difference between himself and Kiyomasa. Kiyomasa continuously launched attacks on Takemichi without stopping, until his friends couldn't bear to see Takemichi, who looked battered. Even though he was badly beaten by Kiyomasa, Takemichi still didn't give up and tried to attack Kiyomasa. With his tenacity, Takemichi finally managed to tire Kiyomasa. Takemichi had no intention of running away from the fight. He had reasons not to back down in the fight. He didn't want to feel the pain of having to run away again like he used to. While the fight between Kiyomasa and Takemichi was still going on, someone came to the center of the field. He warned Kiyomasa not to get too enthusiastic about what he had done. The person who came to the center of the field was the deputy leader of the Tokyo Manji gang named Ryuguji Ken, or also known as the Draken. Behind the Draken there was someone following him. Takemichi seemed to recognize the figure from the photo shown by Naoto in the future. That person is none other than the leader of the Tokyo Manji gang, Sano Manjiro, or also known as Mikey. Mikey then approached Takemichi and asked his name. Then suddenly Mikey said that Takemichi was one of his friends. After that he approached Kiyomasa and started beating him. Mikey immediately left after beating Kiyomasa. Takemichi even feels pressured because Mikey is attracted to him. Takemichi thinks there is no difference from being a slave of Kiyomasa to being a slave of the Tokyo Manji gang. The next day Takemichi met Hinata again, and asked her out on a date. Meanwhile in class Takemichi recalls Naoto's words to prevent a meeting between Sano Manjiro and Kazaki Tada, but he doesn't know how to prevent it even though he has met with Mikey. Not long after, Mikey came to Takemichi's class and asked him to go out with him. When Takemichi was talking to Mikey, Hinata came and immediately slapped Mikey. Draken looks annoyed that Hinata has slapped Mikey. Draken then holds Hinata's hand tightly. Takemichi immediately snapped at the Draken and told him to take his hand off Hinata. Mikey tried to hit Takemichi, but he refused because it was just a joke. Draken and Mikey then went to the field. Soon Hinata apologized to them both for the misunderstanding that occurred. Takemichi had seen Mikey firsthand and couldn't believe that he would later commit so many crimes. Takemichi then asked the reason Mikey was attracted to him. Mikey replies that Takemichi looks like his dead brother. Takemichi is still in the past. He is in a train to accompany Hinata shopping. Hinata is indeed a brave girl, different from Takemichi, who is a coward. Takemichi is also a reckless person. Several times he accidentally discussed future events in front of Hinata. Hinata then invited Takemichi to come to her apartment to study together to prepare for the exam. While studying together, Takemichi had a wonderful time with Hinata watching fireworks on the roof of the building where Hinata lived. Takemichi felt very happy to have a moment with Hinata and had time to mutter in his heart that he wanted to continue to be in that place. He didn't want to go back to the future. When Takemichi was about to hold Hinata's hand, he accidentally grabbed Naoto's little hand. He was very surprised because if he shook Naoto's hand it would mean he would return to the future. Sure enough, Takemichi had awakened back in the present. Takemichi is very upset and sad to have to return when he is spending his wonderful time with Hinata. Naoto then asked Takemichi about the situation in the past. Did he come back because there had been developments? But what actually happened was that he came back because he accidentally grabbed little Naoto's hand. Although a little annoyed, Naoto began to understand how Takemichi crossed time. He was able to return to the same day 12 years ago, and the time that Takemichi spent in the past, time in the present also continues. As long as Takemichi was in the past, his present body was in a state of suspended apparent death. Naoto then suggests that Takemichi should only time travel in his room because it is considered dangerous. When Naoto asked about Takemichi's mission to prevent a meeting between Sano Manjiro and Kazaki Tada whether it had worked, Takemichi said that he had met Mikey, a call for Sano Manjiro, and explained that Mikey was a good person. Takemichi didn't think that Mikey was the one who formed the current gang of Tokyo Manji or Tumen. Takemichi then wants to meet and ask Mikey directly in the present, but he doesn't even know where Mikey is right now. While looking for clues that will lead them to Mikey, Takemichi finds his old friend, Atsushi Sendu, or commonly called Akun. He finally realized that if the events in the past changed, then the conditions in the present also changed. Akun is now one of the top brass of the Tumen or Tokyo Manji gang. After successfully getting the Akun's contact number in his room, Takemichi and Naoto then went to see Akun. After Takemichi and Akun had a moment of nostalgia, Akun surprised Takemichi by admitting that he was the one who pushed Takemichi onto the train track. Akun suspects that Takemichi has time travel because he can be saved by Naoto during the incident at the train station. Takemichi was shocked and saddened to hear the shocking confession of his childhood friend. Takemichi then persuaded Akun to get out of Tumen, but Akun said that he was afraid of Kazaki Tada. Akun also said that Mikey had changed since Draken's death and that he had not seen Mikey for a long time. Akun expressed his admiration for Takemichi and told him to continue fighting to save Naoto and Hinata. After speaking, Akun then committed suicide by jumping from the top of the building. Still in a state of deep sadness over Akun's death, while crying, Takemichi asks Naoto to investigate the day Ryuguji Ken or Draken died. After a few days of messing around with time travel, Takemichi returned to the shop where he worked. But unfortunately he has been fired for not coming to work for 2 weeks. Takemichi finally conveyed his idea to Naoto to tell Hinata about her future like he did to Naoto. Naoto immediately rejected the idea and felt that Takemichi just wanted to find a quick way. Naoto was worried that if Takemichi did that he would be considered crazy and then hated by Hinata. Usually people would not believe in the existence of time travelers, while Naoto used to believe that by chance he was addicted to the occult. Because Akun has died, Takemichi and Naoto are forced to come back from the beginning again. They investigated the death of Draken during a brawl of 50 motorcycle gang members in the Musashi Shrine parking lot in Shibuya District, Tokyo on August 3, 2005. Naoto said that the brawl was a fight between the Draken and Mikey camps in Tumen, but Takemichi did not believe that the two were fighting. Naoto then asks Takemichi to investigate the cause of Draken's death and save him. Moreover, according to Akun, Sano Manjiro or Mikey has changed since Draken's death. The two shook hands and Takemichi returned to the past. How surprised he was when he woke up and was with a girl dressed sexy. Takemichi then ran away from that place and accidentally met Hinata. Takemichi then got a call from Draken. Draken ordered him to come to Musashi Shrine right then and there, and Hinata wanted to come with him. When he arrived at that place, Takemichi met again with Emma, the sexy girl who had been with him. Hinata was angry when she found out that Takemichi had been alone with Emma, even though Emma only wanted to make Draken jealous. Apparently Takemichi was invited to the place because Mikey gathered with his gang members to discuss Mobius. The leader of Mobius, named Osanai, has caused trouble. He has tortured the friend of one of the founders of the Tokyo Manji gang, namely Pa Chin. Even the lover of Pa Chin's friend was also beaten. Mobius is one of the gangs that control the Shinjuku area, while Tumen or Tokyo Manji controls the Shibuya area. Mikey and the rest of his gang decided that they would fight Mobius on August 3rd during the Musashi festival, and on that day the Draken's death occurred. Takemichi then decided to become Draken's bodyguard, but Draken refused. Next, Takemichi plans to follow the Draken wherever he goes. Mikey and Draken had time to go to the hospital to visit his friend Pa Chin's girlfriend, who was in a coma due to being molested by Mobius. The parents of the girl who was in a coma came and immediately scolded Mikey and Draken. Despite being scolded by the girl's father, Draken still bowed, but Mikey felt it was unnecessary because they were innocent. When Mikey almost got emotional due to the girl's father's curse, Draken pulled Mikey's head so that he bowed as a form of apology and responsibility. The girl's mother and father finally wept for their daughter's fate, while Mikey and Draken continued to bow their heads. Draken then uttered a sentence that awakened Mikey. "You don't have to have a head that likes to bend down, just have a heart that cares about other people," said Draken, which made Mikey aware and grateful to have Draken by his side. Takemichi immediately realized the reason Mikey had changed since Draken's death. It was simply because Draken was Mikey's heart all along. That's all the discussion of the Tokyo Revengers anime storyline part 1. Thanks for watching and see you the next video.